When I teach students how to integrate quotes in their writing, I always remind them that good writing follows claim, evidence, analysis as a pattern. When I help them to integrate quotes, I want to remind them that that part of their paper is where they're integrating evidence. When I do that, one thing I try to encourage them to do is use the 3 steps. The 3 steps help students to visualize their claim, evidence, and analysis and how they're integrated in their paper. The first step is to introduce the quote with a signal phrase, such as tag. Tag stands for title, author, genre. An example of a genre would be a newspaper article, a peer-reviewed journal, a short story, or maybe a TED Talk. The second step is to integrate the quote using MLA properly. The third step is to follow up the quote with analysis. The analysis is usually better understood by the reader if there's a signal phrase. Signal phrases could be, for example, in other words, this means that. In essence, what the author is trying to say is that. The author's point here is that. So if we go back to the idea of claim, evidence, and analysis, the signal phrase in the third step signals analysis, and the signal phrase in the first step signals evidence. An example of the 3 steps integrated in your paper would be to use a signal phrase and tag in the first step, and in the third step to use another signal phrase with a quote. The quote I have here is, students from cultures where participation is not a typical feature of classroom dynamics struggle to make the cultural switch. And the way that it's integrated here starts out with tag. In the article, Learning to Speak Up from a Culture of Deference, Andy Malinsky asserts that, quote, students where participation is not a typical feature of classroom dynamics struggle to make the cultural switch, end quote, parentheses 108, end parentheses, period. And then the signal phrase, this suggests that students from cultures that value respect might be quieter in class and earn less participation points. This is an example of how to integrate the quotes that you may have in your paper using the 3 steps. Common mistakes I see in students integrating quotes in their paper would be usually punctuation. A lot of students are not sure where to put the period in a quote. I'm gonna read a quote and you tell me if you think that it's punctuated properly. Romantic poetry is characterized by the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Parentheses, Wordsworth 263, end parentheses, end quote, period. What do you think? Is that correct or incorrect? Okay, you can probably guess that's incorrect. We need to move the parentheses outside of the quote. So we've got quotation, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, end quote, then the parentheses, Wordsworth 263, no comma, and then close the parentheses inside of the period because it's all supposed to be one complete thought, so it stays inside the period. One really important thing is a lot of students forget to put the quotation marks in their paper, and if you do that, your teacher might think that you plagiarized. So don't forget to put quotes in your paper so that your teacher doesn't get the wrong idea and think that you plagiarized when you actually didn't plagiarize. Here are some other common mistakes that I see with students who integrate quotes in their writing dealing with punctuation or capitalization or word choice and page number. Here are some other reminders for integrating quotes in your paper. If you ever need to leave out part of a quote because it's too long and it's not necessarily relevant, you can use an ellipsis, which is those 3 dots, the dot, 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 and the ellipsis shows that something has been taken out from your paper. Another reminder is that when you're integrating quotes, you have to think about claim, evidence, analysis. Where is your quote in that order? It should be in the middle. Make sure that your analysis is coming after your quote. When mentioning an author as you quote, don't forget to use the author's last name in the subsequent mentioning of the author. The first time you'd use the full name and the second time you'd use the last name. If you get confused, the last name is the family name. In claim evidence analysis, it's important to remember that Anecdotal evidence is not as convincing as expert evidence. Expert evidence is far more convincing than anecdotal evidence, which is why you would use quotes to help convince your reader of your claim. Try to avoid writing a paper that's a confirmation-based paper where you're using your evidence to support your claim. Proper research and proper science good practices would have you look at the evidence and look at all the ideas that are there and all of the evidence that you could use before you come up with a claim. Don't start with the claim and then look for evidence to support your claim, because that would result in a confirmation bias paper, which is not the best way to write a paper. If you liked today's video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Brandon Wolf. I appreciate you listening to me talk about quote integration today. Have a good day.